Hello and welcome to episode 467 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' bi-weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Zach Wilkerson, and I will be your host today. And today we're here to talk about a game that is driving me insane, because all the characters are insane too. We are here to talk about the first half of the long-awaited, much requested by me and me alone, Drakengard.
You requested this?
You had some help in that.
Yeah, I've been requesting it for years. And when I took over, I was like, I'm doing it. I'm not putting on a poll. I'm doing it. Because I knew that Slosy was like, we're not doing that. I'm like, okay. Anyway,
you did
let's
this
talk
to
about.
us?
Yeah, I am the one who inflicted this pain upon you. But with the help of some others. And speaking of, let's introduce the panel, starting with you, Ben.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited.
And I am too. And Aleks. Kill.
Hey, it's me.
Hi, Aleks. And Steph.
Hello.
As I mentioned at the top here, we are here to discuss Drakengard, which is a 2003 RPG, kind of, developed by a group named Kavia. It was one of their early games, and I think is most famous nowadays probably for sort of spawning the Nier franchise. And Yoko Taro this is his first time in the director's chair. And we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about Taro. We're going to talk about him this week, and then 2 weeks from now, and then in a while, we're going to really focus on like sort of all of his games. And what's interesting, though, is that even though this game starts, we talk about it as a Yoko Taro game, and certainly we will be coming back to the madman that is Yoko Taro. It doesn't really begin as a Taro product. And Ben, I think you probably know more about this than I do. So before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the development history of Drakengard?
Yeah. So basically, this game started with Kavia, which was formed by a bunch of people who left Namco in like the early 2000s. And
wow, I already did not know that. That tracks very much, though.
Yeah.
Just style-wise, I guess.
Yes. And that was really when like Namco was kind of their height of their like aesthetic prowess with like Ridge Racer Type 4 and
you're talking about
3.
Ridge Racer again, Ben?
Yes. Well, one of the main writers on this game actually was a main writer on Type 4. So there are connections.
Quite a pivot.
Yes. But yeah, so they had kind of worked on those series for Namco, and they split off from Namco, and then this was going to be like their big like flagship title to kind of launch the studio. And it was being published by Enix originally, but this is at the same time when Enix and Square were merging. So, Square mostly did like their own internal development, but Enix didn't really have any internal development and just kind of came to different independent studios and then published their games. So you have the main figures behind this were Takuya Iwasaki, who was from Namco and was director on some Ridge Racer titles, worked on Ace Combat 2 and was the director of Ace Combat 3. And then you also had Takamasa Shiba, who this is like his first producer role. And so like the core concept for this game was originally going to be an aerial combat game with dragons. And that was kind of formulated by Iwasaki. And then Shiba is the one who was like really into Dynasty Warriors and wanted to have that kind of like 1 versus 100 hack and slash on foot combat element added to it. And so that's kind of where the core idea of this game came from, was those two. And then Iwasaki was actually busy with another project in his kind of leadership role at Kavia. So that's how Yoko Taro ended up becoming director of the game, because Iwasaki wasn't able to do it. But it's really interesting that Iwasaki was the director of Ace Combat 3, because a lot of the kind of core things that we think about with Drakengard, like all the endings and like the branching paths and stuff, that was all stuff that he kind of established with Ace Combat 3. But a lot of people didn't really make that connection in the West, especially with that game, because all of those elements of Ace Combat 3 were stripped out of the game for the Western release. So in Japan, like I think that connection was more understood, but here not so much.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we will certainly be, again, as I said, talking about Taro a lot, but to always think about sort of, the way that game development sort of influences him, because we think about multiple endings now. Like, you can't imagine a Taro game that doesn't have multiple endings, right? But that's an idea that he sort of apes from someone else, and he kind of likes the way it's going. And I'm sure that we are all, for the record, listeners, we're only talking up through ending A today. So anything beyond that we haven't seen, but I'm sure that his ideas for those endings ends up being pretty different from what his combat does. But and I think that I'd heard that the reason they had multiple endings in this game, or at least one of the reasons, was that they didn't think it was going to be a game they had a sequel to. And they're like, let's provide them with lots of things that they can sort of dig into. So yeah, I just think it's interesting.
I also read that the performance-based sort of mission unlocks that lead you toward like the different endings and the multiple ending routes were also an idea that ended up being cut from Ace Combat 3.
Yes.
That they ended up adding to this, which is kind of where like the game gets a lot of its more arcadey elements from, because otherwise like this doesn't seem like an arcade game in its aesthetics at all. And then like aside from that, I also read that apparently Enix was kind of like pressuring Taro to like do like create a world in the vein of like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, to like create like a competitor for those franchises. And then Yoko was just like, well, I don't think I could actually compete with those.
It's just like those, but it has incest.
Yeah. So he instead turned to like things like Celtic mythology, which you see in like kind of the elves and fairies in this game, and also just being more inspired by like dark manga like Berserk and Evangelion and things like that. So it ends up being like super subversive instead of like
and it's interesting too, because it's like this game, like the concept for it and everything is kind of born out of all these changes that are happening in the industry at the time. So I bringing that up, Alex, like that it was an Enix game, but then this is when they're merging with Square Enix, so then that affects like how they kind of view what titles they're going to publish. Like they need to be in that kind of certain RPG mold that like Square Enix is known for. And Enix like originally would publish like all kinds of different stuff, but I think that really affected like the direction of the game, that they were going to be part of like Square Enix and what that kind of meant.
And I think it's Kavya is a creator in general. They make all kinds of like really odd games in like sort of the AA space, right? And it makes me sad to think about like,
what are some other titles they've done, if you mind?
They did
let me look it up.
Beatdown Fists of Vengeance on the PS2 is a game they made. They made a Ghost in Shell standalone complex game for the PS2.
Oh, they made that one? That one was actually pretty good, if I recall.
Yep, Bullet Witch.
I haven't played that one in a while. Oh my god, they made Bullet Witch? Okay.
Yeah, it's like if Bayonetta was jank as hell.
I'm gonna be honest, they made a lot more than I thought. A lot of this is like a lot of like anime titles or stuff.
Resident Evil Dead Aim, which is in development at the same time, and is why Iwasaki actually didn't direct this game, because he was directing that one. And then a bunch of Naruto games.
They have like tons of anime adaptations on their resume, it looks like. Like a One Piece GBA game.
Yep. And
Resident Evil Dead Aim now. I don't know why.
Yeah, and pretty famously that game funny. Cryon that they were.
Yeah, I wanted that game for such a long time. Yeah. I remember that. The artwork looked really cool.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I like about it then is that like they give the developers the space for that to happen, and I think that pretty recently Taro came out and he said like one of the great tragedies right now in game development is that like no one's throwing money at the weird anymore, at least in the AAA space. Obviously with the indie space as it is, you have plenty of things that are weird and interesting and really cool, but like in a way that is also using more modern graphical engines and things like that is just not something that you see so much anymore. But let me tell you, Drakengard, it's a weird game. And it's not a game that I'll say up front, it's not a game that I particularly am enjoying playing at all, actually. I think that some people like Ben are going to defend some of the combat in this game, and I will not be that person. But I really respect what it's doing. And, and a lot of what it's doing in 2003 are things that we can almost take for granted. I mean, this is pre things like Lisa the Painful, things like Undertale, things that really put us in a position where we are playing as people who we don't agree with or we don't like, and that really sort of do meta-narrative stuff. And that isn't to say that games before weren't doing that. Aleks and Ben and I talked about a game called Moon that got remade, and it was in some ways dealing with some more thematic stuff from a very different perspective, though, right? And so I think that it sort of sits as this sort of like really unique experience that I don't enjoy playing.
Well, it's a very ambitious game, both in the narrative, like you're talking about, and I think in the mechanics, like the gameplay design. And that's the thing with like ambitious games, right? Like sometimes they, it's like Icarus. They like reach for the, they fly too high and then they kind of crash and burn, right? So you have a bit of that in this game, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, for them to like have all these subversive narrative ideas and then also be trying to do like a hybrid RPG, Muso, flight simulator type game on top of that, like that's really something else. And yeah, I know it did end up leading to a lot of programming challenges that we end up seeing in the game's technical issues, like how it renders enemies, like the camera transitions and things like that.
Apparently they wanted to add jumping in and they couldn't figure out how. I'm like, how spaghetti code does it have to be that you can't figure out how to make the person jump?
Yeah, but I mean, you do have those seamless transitions from on foot to the dragon, which is like pretty crazy for the time.
They actually feel pretty good. Yeah, jumping on the dragon. Yeah.
Yeah,
that happens a lot because I'm
that
getting
fire
shot
attack
down.
is so satisfying too. Yeah. Like it just feels good in my hands. It's the one gameplay thing that feels good in my hands.
I'm curious. Before we really dive into the nitty gritty here, who in here in on this podcast has played Drakengard before doing it for today, and when did you play it? So I think that's going to help sort of contextualize our thinking here.
I played it as a kid, Yeah, so like it was kind of interesting to start reading like Shakespeare and then playing this, which just feels like dark video games Shakespeare.
It's almost like tragedy. A CPS call right there. Yeah, playing this game as a kid,
playing this game, and then I'm reading like soliloquies from Macbeth, and I'm going through it.
I'm like, wow.
And suddenly you need a child psychologist.
Material out there. Yes. I am naive.
So, how did you feel about it as a kid, Steph?
But that's the thing. Like I liked it because there's so many feel good stories out there, especially when you're young. A lot of it is trying to, give you positive lessons, good morals, good characters, heroes. And this is just so not that. And I kind of loved how just awful it was, like how depraved it was, how sad it all is. It's a genuine tragedy. And I think he gets even better at writing that element in Automata. We're just, everything's kind of going good and then everything starts kind of crashing and burning around you. And it's just how you can mitigate the damage. And it's just kind of a cool game to ride out because of that. So yeah, I'm with you. I really don't like the gameplay in this one. I think Drakengard 2 is a bit more polished, but I love how dark it is. It's just wonderfully miserable.
Anybody else play it before?
Oh, yeah. I played it in the lead up to Drakengard 3. Because I was still like really, I think Drakengard 3 came out after the PS4, but I was still really into PS3 at the time. So when I thought it was like just looked really interesting, and so I wanted to like play 1 and 2 before that came out.
The character designs are very intriguing. Like all the artwork design is very alluring, at least too.
Yes. And that's interesting actually, because the character designer was just like a low level like artist at college.
A college student, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very young. I think he was either in college or right out of college, and they just like really liked his art, so they made him the character designer. And he's done like I think quite a few other games for Square Enix after that.
He did a Last Story even.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he did also like I think what was it, Lord of
the Last
Arcana?
Story designs are so much fun. Yeah, Lord of Arcana, the Terra Battle or something as well.
Yeah, I think he worked on Terra Battle as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty interesting. Like even the little things. Like I like how Furia is wearing this white dress, but she's got like shoulder armor or like hip armor on the side of it that just kind of hangs there. It looks cool, like, and like some of the weapons are just kind of weird and wild and very technical and interesting looking. I get really obsessed with some of the details. Even the dragons look cool, and the monsters that they had to make for pacts are all very interesting.
Yeah. I think the monster designer was actually a different artist on the team.
Probably, yeah.
I think it's crazy, like how different. Like it seems like every level like has like a different type of like enemy soldier that you fight, and they're all like grotesque and like very inhuman looking.
They also move around very inhumanely, but yeah.
Yeah, just like really weird, exaggerated proportions and stuff. Yeah.
It's a little technically messy, this first one. Little janky.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily even like have different enemy behavior necessarily, but they do look cool. They look really interesting.
They definitely do not have different enemy behavior. All run at you at once and then swing.
The video you shared in the chat was hilarious. It was just swing. Well,
with 1 HP left, like I was in that situation way too much.
Well, the AI is like so bizarre. Like most of the time they just kind of stand there and get wailed on, but then every now and then one of them will get like a bug up its butt and it just goes ham on you. And you can get like really badly stun locked and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you like try to roll and suddenly your camera's like completely off center and it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah, no rolling. It's like I guess we could talk about the combat a little bit here. Actually, before we do that, Aleks, have you played Drakengard before?
So I was like, working my way basically backwards from Yoko Taro's works. Like I'd played like Nier Automata into Nier Gestalt. And then I knew we were going to do this podcast eventually because like you had already told me about that and I was very excited, but I was starting to get impatient. So I actually did my first playthrough of this last year.
Okay.
And I was just really excited for it. And yeah, I was pretty fascinated how much I was liking the game despite its issues. And obviously we can get into that as we go into the individual elements, but I just think this game manages like such a unique tone reflected across all its game elements, even compared to Yoko Taro's later games. Like there's something unique about what this game is hitting tonally. And
there's like always one moment in his games that feel like genuine hell. And I love that.
Yeah, and I will be with Ben defending the combat somewhat. So
whatever.
Okay, well let's start there. Although I think a little bit of context is helpful to talk about the combat because I think that the way it plays out, I think, has so much to do with the narrative in this game. And again, I can't remember if I said this pre-recording or not, but one of the things that I always think is dangerous when you're talking about a Taro game is we always want to make everything purposeful, right? And it's like, Taro sexualizes 2B in Nier Automata because he's trying to talk about 9S's obsession with her, blah, blah, blah. And then Taro's like, no, I just like hot girls. And like, do I believe Taro? I don't know. But whatever. The point is, in this game, so we have, so you play as Kaim, and I think that the setup, really interestingly, is very sort of standard, right? You are playing as this dude named Kaim, and he's trying to go save his sister, who is no longer his sister. She's the goddess, and he's a member of the Union, and the Empire is trying to kidnap her because we discover the Empire is evil. At least that's what we think at this point. Who knows? It's Taro. We'll keep going.
We're the Union.
Yeah, exactly. And as you're doing it, like Kaim hates the Union, or not, it doesn't hate the Union. He hates the Empire, and he doesn't have a voice for very long in this game. But like his very few words early on are just like, "Empire must destroy the Empire. You killed my parents." Rah! And then he comes across this dragon who was being tortured by the Empire. And this dragon just like freaking hates him. She's like, "You suck, dude." But like they hate each other. Like dragon killed his parents. He hates the dragon, but they're both going to die if they don't make a pact. And then that sets up what I think is one of the most interesting things this game does, which is after they set up the pact, Kaim has to give something up, and he gives up his voice, which turns him into a silent protagonist.
Cute.
Which, we think about silent protagonists, we think about Dragon Quest, we think about all this other stuff. But the interesting thing is the dragon, I think, can like read Kaim's thoughts.
Well, they communicate telepathically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the dragon, Angelus, as we discover her name is much later, talks about Kaim's bloodthirst just constantly. And it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And he just like doesn't say anything, which is very like cool, silent protagonist. But I think it's Taro's way of getting at like, you know, you have all this murder in all these RPGs, and you have the silent protagonist. Like, what's really happening in their head? If they're killing thousands and thousands, and my kill count, I think at this point in Drakengard, because it keeps track, is 30,000 people. So yeah, I just think that the silent protagonist element of it is really interesting.
So an interesting detail about that too is that in the Japanese version, the voice actor for Kaim and the voice actor for Angelus are the same voice actor.
Oh,
so it's like there's an element of that to like where Angelus kind of becomes Kaim's voice in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I don't know if when they were doing the casting, like that became a detail that they then built in, or like, you know, vice versa or whatever. But it's an interesting little nugget.
yeah, it's kind of giving me new perspective. Okay, I like it.
Yeah, the way that the dialogue happens like throughout the missions, I think, is ultimately what makes the game work so well. Because the gameplay itself, we'll get into it, not the most mechanically satisfying, not the worst thing ever either, but just the way that we have the silent protagonist and Angelus constantly bantering, and the other NPCs that come in also like provide tons of banter during missions. It's like the game is like communicating with you directly as a player and asking you like, oh, how do you feel about like all this like very explicit like mass murder you're committing? And like there's just like you're being taunted constantly, you're getting like philosophical remarks from Angelus, you're being asked questions, and it's just this really interesting way. Yeah,
it's okay, I can't say anything.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up, Aleks, and like Zach, you were saying earlier, like, oh, how much of this is like intended and how much of it is just like us justifying something, you know, that we're seeing but maybe wasn't necessarily intended. Is that like this idea of like having this hack and slash game against a bunch of enemies like wasn't Taro's idea, right? Like that's something that Shiba brought to the project and kind of was decided before him. So, but I think the way I look at it is like they were already going to make a game where you were going to kill a bunch of enemies, but where that kind of Taro, directorial or autorial thing comes in is where like, how do we make the player like look at that and react to that? And like, what's the kind of perspective that we draw from like that type of gameplay? And that's where I think it like is intentional, right? Like that the way that the characters talk about what's going on screen, the way the story kind of progresses in contrast to the like waves and waves of enemies you're killing. That's kind of where that comes from, even though like it was going to be this type of game no matter what. But
somewhat off topic, but I like that Nier Automata makes those stupid robots kind of cute. And like, you don't want to be killing them by the end. And you kind of mentioning how Yoko Taro didn't want to make this kind of gameplay, and kind of played into it in a different way is kind of what I'm thinking about there too.
Yeah, it's like funny. Making conventional gameplay just feel different to participate in. IN is what he does so great. And like for an example, like just if you finish like a mission in most games, usually if there's like an NPC bark, it'll be something like, "Oh, congrats, we did it! Yay, we're doing great." And here, on the other hand, like one that comes to mind is you finish a mission and Angelus is just like, "Humans are a race to be pitied." It's like, oh, okay. This is the kind of game we're playing. I see.
Yeah, and it's I don't know how familiar you guys are
Angelus,
with.
I just asked how the weather is.
I don't know how much you guys know about like Dynasty Warriors, but I think a lot of that is like kind of a direct reaction to the kind of like storytelling and like dialogue that happens in missions in Dynasty Warriors, because it's very like larger than life, and it's like the kind of Romance of the Three Kingdoms style, like epic kind of hero storytelling, and lots of like bombastic kind of goofy scenes, and like they heroes declaring their like virtue or whatever, and then they kill all these guys, and this seems like very much a reaction to that. It's like, what would these people who do this actually be like? Like, would they be
psychotic?
Yeah, exactly.
A little messed up.
Exactly.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's kind of a fun way to view it. And yeah, I guess that's kind of what makes it kind of interesting, because the game really calls it out that like all this killing and bloodshed is bad, and it's kind of fun to actually turn that lens back on you.
It also like manifests in like the mission descriptions and like your mid-mission kind of directive changes, like when you're killing like the goblins and you get a mission directive that suddenly like chase the subhuman soldiers as they flee, do not let them escape your dragon fire. It's like it's just adds so much color to like what you're doing, and it just really like is an interesting reflection of what we're doing in these video games most of the time.
Yeah,
so it's good that you brought up Moon a little earlier again too, and I think you even whiffed at Undertale. That kind of again likes to subvert that back at you.
And I'm guessing that as we go past ending A, that we will see sort of more of maybe the Empire or whatever. But I also like that throughout this, like they don't make Taro doesn't make any effort to humanize the Empire. It's just like you're being criticized constantly for what you're doing, but it's not like you're killing someone who you like. And I'm trying really hard not to kind of bring the rest of Taro's oeuvre into this, but like if you think about something like Replicant or Gestalt, in that game, he makes a really strong effort to point out that you are killing things that have consciousnesses, right? Whereas here, he's at least he's not so far. And I also think it's interesting that like the people who are constantly commenting at you, like they don't have better solutions. They're like Vertile in particular. Oh my gosh, who I saw in some apparently some like Japanese poll was like the most hated character in Drakengard by like an enormous margin, and that is correct because he never shuts up. He's like, how could you do all this killing? Kill them all! Kill them all! How could you do all these killing? He's extremely obnoxious, and he's the worst. And he also has a pact, but the only thing he lost was his hair because he's such a wuss. And so his dragon turned to stone immediately. So he didn't get much out of it. But like Inuart is obnoxious and annoying and whiny even before he turns against you. So like the other characters aren't any better.
Yeah. Inuart's interesting to me because I feel like in any other RPG, like Inuart would be the main character.
That was actually the original plan.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And like Kaim is such a like subversion of that typical like hero, but they also like I think do a really good job of kind of showing like how Inuart kind of becomes corrupted and everything. And like having that kind of voice nagging at the back of his head. I think it's just like a really interesting way to show to show like the corruption and like that all the characters go through because of the events of the story and everything.
Yeah, at least
you like
so
start
far,
when you first meet him, he's like just playing his harp for you too, and like you cuddle up with your sister there and just enjoy the music.
At least so far in the story, there's like a level of cynicism here that I think we don't really see in Yoko Taro's even later works, like which are all like cynical to an extent, but just the idea that Kaim is our main character here rather than someone like Inuart is just like really a reflection of this game's narrative philosophy and just like its full on like embrace of like insanity rather than like any kind of like redemption or empathy that we see in a lot of his later games.
Like everything does go to hell. Like it's not about the happy ending. I think Drakengard 2 has a happy ending and it feels weird. It shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like when I was researching like the development of this game that apparently Iwasaki like kind of did the broad outline for characters like Fourier and for Kaim and for Inuart, but then characters like Vertile, Sire, and Ariak were like fleshed out mostly by Taro, and I think that kind of makes sense given that
tracks.
Those three characters are like the most like disturbing.
Arios is like such a lost cause. Everything about what is it, Leonard?
Oh, and Leonard, I think, was also one of his. Yeah,
and I hate
Leonardo.
that Seer trusts him. I'm just like, oh,
yeah. I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, and I don't know how much we're gonna get into that stuff.
I haven't even met Seer yet, so I don't know.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, like that darkness. Well, it's interesting. Like, we're only going to ending A, and it's already such like a dark game, but that darkness kind of unfolds, especially with like the companions and the other endings, and it's really interesting. It just how much, like, you know, even with ending A, like, it's a very dark game, but it is kind of in a lot of ways like it kind of still feels like a traditional RPG in a lot of ways, and then how much that kind of just like collapses as you progress through the rest of it.
Like, I love Aria. She's like totally, completely, unsavably psychotic, and they're like, "Do you want to come along with us?" I guess, you know, like, I guess I'll help.
Yeah, you're proto Zero, and
we need everybody at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and I feel like I keep saying this, like I have to keep couching what I'm saying based on the fact that I've only gotten through ending A, right? But yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, like if you played the game and you only got to ending A, like especially if you don't know who Taro is, and I do, you probably would just be like, well, that was kind of a weird RPG, huh?
Yeah.
But I'm sure that sort of continues on. But I think that a big part of that too, like assuming you even got to ending A, because I was really curious, like what someone would have thought of the combat. And I'm guessing that a lot of what's happening with the combat is purposeful, but like what someone would have thought about the combat, sort of not knowing who Taro is, where like a lot of people justify the boredom of the original Nier through that. They talk about like the difference in combat styles between 2B and 9S because it's a point, right? Whereas here you have two different types of combat. One is the ground combat where you're literally just slashing stuff and you get like these really sort of silly finishers in there that work sometimes, but they also allow you to get stun locked a little too easily, so I don't use them that often. And then you've got the dragon aerial combat. And the way the two things sort of work together, I think, is really ambitious and really interesting. But it becomes extremely repetitive. And again, I think that one of the arguments can be that, like, killing is repetitive. It's not supposed to be fun, so, like, you're not allowed to have fun. And I'm like, well, is it kind of supposed to be having fun? And we talked about we've talked about this already, but like for me, like I don't know, maybe my mind will be changed in thinking that like there's a difference between like bad design and tedium, right? Like I can deal with the tedium in some of Taro's later games because I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be tedious, but like the camera stuff and all that other stuff, like I'm like, dude, this is just like bad and hard to deal with, and the aerial controls make me a little sick sometimes. Like I don't know. Let's talk about the combat.
Yeah, I think too, like what it's important to like remember about this game is that like, so what they're kind of working off of is like what was established by, you know, what we know in the West as Dynasty Warriors 2. And that game was like really ambitious and impressive for the time. You know, it launched with the PS2, and having all those enemies on screen and all that was like a really big deal. But it was very rough, right? Like the combat was very basic and it was very repetitive, and you had the low draw distance and the enemies popping in. That was a feature of that game, just like this game, right? Like especially that early in the PS2's life, they just didn't have a technical handle to like be able to do those big battlefields without having those technical limitations. And this game like is trying to do, you know, add in all these other elements which kind of elevate above that game. But that repetition, I think, is just like kind of inherent to the style of game that they were doing. And, you know, later Dynasty Warriors would add in a lot of like what I would call like battlefield management, where you have a lot of different like objectives happening on the map at one time, and you're trying to like manage your time effectively while killing enemies to get around that. And that's how they kind of alleviated the repetition, but that wasn't really established yet. So I think for this game, they kind of recognize that it's very repetitious, but then like leaned into that with like the tone of the story and the narrative and all that, to try to kind of give it an extra dimension, because they hadn't really had that other ways, like gameplay ways of alleviating the repetition modeled to them yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I even played one of those older Dynasty Warriors games. It was like the only Musou game I've played was like, it was either 2, 3, or maybe even 4. But I remember not liking it when I played it and just thinking it was like really repetitious and monotonous. So the fact that this game, like, again, like Yoko Taro was asked to make a Dynasty Warriors type game, so he probably saw that, he felt that same thing. I was just like, okay, here's that gameplay style, that exact sort of design, and here's some like interesting kind of narrative contextualization that makes it into a statement rather than just like this gameplay loop that we'd otherwise be experiencing. And I think that's really where like this game's creativity comes from.
Yeah, I totally agree, Aleks. I think that they really like, they were kind of stuck with this mode, this like formula style of game, and then they kind of wanted to draw something like more meaningful out of that the best way that they could. Yeah.
So are you convinced, Zach? Is it awesome?
No, I'm not. I'm not at all. Because it still has to like. Again, I know I can't like. It's a 2003 game. It was made on a budget. Like all those things are there, right? And I get those things, and I understand the thematic thrust of those things, and it doesn't bother me too much, but it can actually sometimes be like, because of the weird AI sometimes ganking you, and so like it feels like, you know, there's like a type of friction that I don't think is intended. It would actually almost, I think, be like more thematically relevant if it was easier. And like the way that it tries to add in variety, like in those field missions where you can pull out Angelus. And then like then there's archers. If there's just like 2 archers who are like more dangerous than anything else in this game, just 2 freaking archers.
Yeah.
And they can just like knock you out of the sky. Yeah. And then like you get knocked down into a pile of enemies and then you get ganked. I think that is just bad, and in my opinion. And I know that there is some variety added in with the weapons, which I think we talked about a little bit pre-recording, because in this game, like, as is true in, you know, I think every Taro game that I've played, like you can gather a bunch of different weapons. You have like these different stories on the weapons, which are really cool. I always love weapon stories in all the Taro games that I've played.
Always talk about depressing. A few of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't really read them yet. I'll probably do more of that before the next part, but you're welcome to. But then you're sort of punished for not using the weapon you already have leveled up, because that weapon is a lot more powerful. So then you have to go just kill more enemies. And again, you have to go kill stuff. Like, you're rewarded in this game for doing the thing the game seems to argue against. You're rewarded for going and killing things over and over and over again, which I think is interesting. But then it also makes you suffer, which again, thematically is interesting. But some of that suffering, I don't think, is on purpose.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Zach. Like, you bringing up the archers or the ballista that are like on like so many of the combat maps. Like, that is it. It's like the seamless transition that we talked about before from like on foot to dragon combat, and like being able to switch between the two. Like, that's a great idea. But then the game design like doesn't let you really use it for the most part, because they put archers everywhere, and like you get shot by an archer like 1 or 2 times on the back of Angelus, and you're knocked off of it like immediately, right? So like they're like in conflict with each other, and I think that is something that like is really hard to get around with this game. That like, and I don't know if it's for balance reasons, like they realized, oh, if you can just fly around on Angelus and like shoot fireballs at everything, like it just like makes everything a cakewalk. But there's just a lot of things that like where the design is very rough, and that part is the part that doesn't really feel necessarily
not a good gameplay loop.
Yeah, so I would definitely agree that it doesn't feel like a polished product, but at the same time, I was able to find some fun in this sort of gameplay loop where, so your target is in like a group where there are archers surrounding. You can use like the little left and right strafes on Angelus to try to like dodge the arrows to get like closer to your target. Then you can like dismount the dragon like close to those archers, dispatch the archers, and then if your target isn't like dragon proof, you can get back on the dragon, and then just like start decimating like that. So like there are these ways I've managed to find the fun, even if like I don't think that the design itself is perfect.
I found
And,
it.
Like similarly, like just messing around with like the different weapon types is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I
The weapon
appreciate the
types are
fact
fun.
that you don't actually have to kill that many enemies if you don't want, but they're always there to kind of just like ham at and like try to level up your weapons or level up your dragon to make the later missions easier. The game gives you like a lot of options in terms of like how you're approaching the mission designs and things like that I think actually are somewhat clever, even when there are definitely points that I'm just like seething at my screen because a stupid archer killed me and things like that.
Yeah, and the stage design, I think too, actually has a lot of really clever like things to
Yeah.
it. Like there's so like a lot of the weapons are hidden within stages, and you really have to go out of your way to like get them.
There is some sense of place, like
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
feel a bit
and-
worldy.
And that's the thing that I think differentiates it too from like, Dynasty Warriors. Like they're not just these big open like segmented maps. Like they have a sense of place, and then they really do a good job of like making interesting like troop formations and things happen in those areas. And like a lot of times if you pull up the map and like most of your mission may be in like 1/3 of the map, but then you'll notice there's like enemies in this other part of the map. And the mission may never take you over there, but if you do go over there and you do fight those enemies, and they might be enemies that you won't see in the other part of the mission, usually there is some kind of reward for that. And so,
but like half the time there's not.
Yeah,
I have walked into
Yeah.
so many empty spaces. I'm like, I bet there's a weapon over here. I'm like, nope, I just walked all the way to that cliff for nothing.
well, they got to keep you on your toes.
Thanks.
They got to keep you on your toes. But yeah, it's like,
did you notice with the like, because there's two types of like missions. There's like the story campaign missions, and then there's like the expeditions ones that take place on like the same maps. I notice a lot of the time the expedition versions will introduce like either weapon unlocks or even like straight up objectives into parts of the map that were unused in the story version. So there's something there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like it's a very like economical use of the space that they had already created for the game. Like I think the expeditions are kind of that way where they're like, oh, well, we made this big map and we didn't use half of it. So we can just kind of remix this mission and then give it kind of more of a purpose than it had before. Yeah, which
I would
is
agree
smart.
with that if the first mission was fun to begin with, though. Like going back and playing a not fun mission with different enemy placement on another not fun mission isn't fun to me. It just feels like batting to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true, and that's kind of the way that the like core mechanics like in some ways kind of let down like the ambition of the game. But I don't know. I mean, I also think the like basic combat, like you kind of get into the zone a little bit, and like it is really repetitive, but I would find myself like, really thinking about, okay, at what point in this combo can I activate like the finishing move, and like if I do like this much of the combo string, like is it a more effective, like it's more effective, the finishing move is more effective. And so like trying to build your combo chains up too, because if you get like enough of a combo chain, you get like different like effects. So like you can heal, or there's like a big like magical blast that'll happen, or you can pick up like a buff that makes you really, really strong. And you can kill enemies in like 1 or 2 hits. And so it's almost like that meta game of like managing your like combo meter and not getting hit by enemies and like trying to chain the groups of enemies together. I know that's kind of where I found the fun in it, I guess.
And then the RPG elements also allow you to start getting more out of the game the more you play it, I feel, because I didn't do any of the expedition missions until I did like a full playthrough to ending A. And then like before this podcast, I was like experiencing all the story content of the first 8 chapters again, while also doing a couple of the missions. And I was just like getting like a lot of kind of leveling for different weapons and Angela's during that. And then by the time I got to the expedition missions, I was like just able to go on like a power trip, and that started feeling like pretty good. And I was able to start like experimenting more, and a lot of that frustration I was feeling on my first playthrough, as I'm getting like better at the game and like knowing how to work around the jank, like I'm starting to just have more fun with it, to be honest. not to forgive kind of like a lot of the criticisms, the valid ones we've been discussing.
Yeah, and Alex, I think that's kind of like the intended like way to play it, or what they kind of like encourage you to do, because some of those expedition like requirements and like the expedition missions in general are just really tough if you're trying to do them as they become available.
Before you have a level 3 dragon, I think that almost all the timed aerial missions
don't even try them.
would be
they're super difficult,
even on easy, which people who listen to this podcast regularly know that like I'm like a hard mode enjoyer. I am not a hard mode enjoyer in this game.
Well, you're not aerial missions.
I'm like knocking that down to easy in a second.
Yeah, I do think that the aerial missions are worth talking about, because I think that they are like kind of the most unique aspect of this game, though. And like, I think the thing it does best, like there are quite a few like riding on a dragon type games on the PS2, and I do think Drakengard actually manages to like maybe deliver the best kind of dragon aerial combat experience on the system, which maybe is kind of a ignominious like award to give it, but I do like the
that makes me glad that I have not played other dragon games on the PS2 then.
No, I'm with you, Ben. I think the aerial missions are like just gameplay design wise the highlight of the game. I think the dragon movement actually feels pretty good once you get it figured out. Using like the manual shots versus like the lock-on shots, knowing the difference with the different enemy types can get like pretty satisfying. When you get like your full charge and you just like are able to explode basically everything on the screen, feels amazing. I think like those missions genuinely feel good to play.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's like an interview where they ask Shiba if they were inspired by Panzer Dragoon, which I think makes sense because that's like a really obvious comparison point. But he says like no, they didn't look at Panzer Dragoon at all, and like. It's like a little hard to believe that because the lock-on mechanic is like so similar, but it is really different than Panzer Dragoon, the actual like way that you play. And I can see kind of the ace combat influence because especially in the later aerial missions, like when you get more enemies that aren't just stationary, but are like fly around and will like attack you and flank you and stuff, it really does start to feel like dogfighting. In those encounters, and I think that's when the game is really at its best, as far as the gameplay.
So you convinced Zach?
No, Steph, you got to back me up here. Talk about how bad the aerial combat is, Steph.
I'm not crazy about it, but I don't hate it either. I definitely got frustrated with it. And I don't like losing at those kinds of levels. I don't know.
No,
well,
I mean,
it's very punishing. They're very punishing,
and that's one of the worst parts. Like whether it's the aerial mission or like there was one in a castle, I think in chapter 1, where I died like at the end of that castle, and I was in there for 25 freaking minutes, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Give me checkpoints!" But yeah, I mean that's just an era thing, and I can accept that. In a I need to get good situation. So,
definitely the game is very punishing for failure, and I do think that that's way worse for the on foot segments because they're just so much longer. Like at least the aerial missions, even though you can die really fast, like they're only usually take like 2 to 5 minutes at most. And I mean, if you're on a ground mission and you're like 30 minutes in and you die, I mean that is a bad feeling. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, I was right in front of like the target. I didn't realize it because I had to kill the last, other target. You know what I mean? I was right in front of like walking up the steps to be done because I had been walking around trying to find this weapon for like 25 minutes. Anyway, that's on me. As much as I enjoy talking about the combat in Drakengard, let's talk about something that I like more. And I'm going to pick up on something that you said earlier, Ben. You sort of talked about in combat, and I do think this is a part of what they're going for, is that you sort of get into this zone, you get into this rhythm. And this game has like zone written all over it, vibe, as the kids would say. It all is just sort of like, it all kind of coheres into this really odd experience where I feel like I'm going sort of progressively insane as I play it. And I think the combat is part of it because it's like a fever dream. It's like, this is the same map I did 7 hours ago. I don't even know where I am anymore. But one of the things that I think is underrated about that is the music. Oh my gosh, the music in this game is is demonic. And I'm stealing from someone else
Perfect,
here.
yeah.
Like especially like when you're reading those descriptions of the missions before you go into them, and it's like that.
Yeah.
It's about that dissonant. Yeah, it sounds about right. So the music in this game, it's interesting because it's a Taro game, and so the music's not beautiful, which seems weird. Like where's
Yeah, just before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So, yeah.
The composer for this is actually Nobuyoshi Sano, who is mostly known for composing the Tekken series before this. So another like Namco connection. And also he did a lot of songs for Ridge Racer. And so this is like extremely different than like his previous work. But it's kind of interesting, like the soundtrack for Drakengard like got so much criticism in Japan specifically, like especially on like the forum like two channel, if you guys are familiar with that he actually like didn't want to compose for the sequel, and just he was like the sound director but didn't do the music composition for the sequel because he was kind of like took so much criticism for it. But I think it's phenomenal and really fits like the tone and mood of the game.
I what I saw about the soundtrack is that it actually, like, the compositions actually borrow elements from like real like established classical music, and then they would record the little bit that they wanted to use with their own equipment, and then actually digitally mixed and kind of started like cutting the elements and like patching them back together. So that's how you get this really kind of like twisted, jarring kind of staccato effect that a lot of these compositions have. And it like ends up using this like old school, like kind of Renaissance medieval-esque compositions, and then like corrupts it. That's literally like happening on both like the narrative level and like the musical level. So it like complements it like perfectly. And then something else I just like would notice in some of these tracks is just like random noises inserted in the background. Like one in when you're in the forest, you'll just like be like having this really aggressive, like pulsating, like classical music at you. And then there's just like bird chirps on top of it. And it's like, just creates like a completely like chaotic, demented atmosphere. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's like really similar, I think, to like the approach like Akira Yamaoka took on like Silent Hill, where you have like a lot of like industrial sounds that you wouldn't traditionally hear in like music, but used for like, you know, to kind of create that kind of oppressive atmosphere. And like, yeah, maybe these songs like and the tracks in this game, like you wouldn't really want to listen to outside of the game, but for the
not to
like,
study / work too.
Yeah, this is definitely not lo-fi beats.
But just sitting there with my eyes wide and unblinking.
Music to go insane to.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of creating that atmosphere, it's just like so like effective, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially as like the sky turns blood red and everything is just going into complete chaos. You're just like, yeah, this is what that would sound like. You know, the horns blaring, you know, the people are dying. Everything's just terrible. It totally works. I hate to say.
It's such a like brutal like cacophony of like you know, dissonant sounds and you know what you feel like your brain might be like emitting if you were experiencing this stuff. Yeah.
The opening themes, I think, do a good job of that insanity too. I remember Drakengard 2 had a good one of it, and this one too, where like they layer a lot of the voices together across a pretty soothing mix. I don't know. Yeah, just all of it sounds like insanity.
Yeah, I mean, I go ahead.
Go ahead. It's okay.
I was going to say I watched the intro movie yesterday because I didn't watch it since I first started playing the game, and I was like, somehow this like captures what this game is, even though like it seems like it could be very traditional in some ways, but then like as you were saying, like it sort of sounds like sort of normal underneath, but then it sounds not, and then it's like the sound mixing is all over the place. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
and Aleks, I think it's interesting you mentioned like the process of like how they would take the music and then like remix it and to kind of create something, to kind of give it the feeling they wanted. Because Sano, after this, like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Korg series of like sound software that was on the DS. He made that. So,
Oh wow,
yeah. So I wonder
cool.
if that process for Drakengard is actually kind of what gave him the idea to then go and make that software, because that's what that software basically allows you to do is kind of remix and take sound effects and stuff and kind of move them around and create unique kind of sounds.
It sounds like it would actually be effective coming out of a DS too.
Well, yeah, that software is actually kind of infamous because if you did certain stuff, you could actually blow out the speakers in your DS.
Nice.
Using the software. Yeah.
Nice. For some reason, that reminds me, there was a Europe-only mobile version of this game that was basically like a side-scrolling beat-em-up.
Like a feature phone game. Yeah.
Like 2004 Vodafone game.
Yeah,
and
it was
the music,
made by a British developer.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
A little unrelated, but in the Drakengard 2 art book, they put in like advertisements for like fake games, and one of them was a dating sim with its characters. And like same thing, the vibes for it are just wonderfully wrong.
Sim for Drakengard. I want a fan-made version of that. Everyone dies at the end, no matter what choices you make.
Well, in some ways, like Drakengard 3, like almost kind of has that element a little bit with like Zero after. Never mind, I won't get into that. But collecting like the companions of her sisters,
they're all kind of messed up in horrible ways.
Yeah.
Like one of them can't be normal, not one.
Yeah.
and that's
really
generally with this
Dragon
cast
Card
too.
3.
There's like not a normal character among the bunch.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
weirdly, Noe is the hero of the second one, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the good hero, but like all of them are just kind of like depraved and sad and fighting
with the undertones of like incest and pedophilia that is in this game. I don't know if we need a dating sim version of it.
Oh.
I hadn't even thought about that. Thank you for that. I mean, I think that when you're talking about I think that the tonality is so much a part of the storytelling too, because and I'm not sure how much of these gaps are going to be filled in, but as I'm playing through it, I find myself they'll just kind of characters will just show up and they'll have motivations and they'll talk about the Watchers, but they don't really explain what the Watchers are.
Yeah.
I think they're gods, something to do with the seeds of destruction.
Yeah, that gets explained a lot more through the other. Yeah.
But I think that I like, because you're right, Steph, the music, and then when the sky is going red, it sort of feels like you're descending into hell.
Yeah.
And there's sort of this happy-ish ending here, even though your sister, who is the goddess, kills herself. And I know that Aleks talked about incest, and there's been some mild indications.
Whoa. Don't
so
say
far.
that.
I know that Aleks likes to talk. I'm just kidding. There's been some mild implications about the feelings of Furii. I'm not sure what's going on with that. And Mana, is this kid who's gone insane because they're infected with the Watchers, but I don't really know who Mana is. And it's the bad guys are not very well drawn, and you aren't very well drawn in Furii, which I want to talk about, is particularly not well drawn, but it all just feels like it doesn't fit. And then the Empire seems to be full of these sky cities that look like modern cities that somehow fit into this ancient European, it all it just makes me feel uncomfy. The music.
Yes.
Yeah, and some of that, some of it is the companions do flesh out a lot of that, and will you don't even have to get them to reach this first ending. So, we'll I guess we'll talk about that more next time. But yeah, there's a lot of just unsettling kind of elements, and as the layers kind of get peeled back from around this world and what's going on in it, I mean, it just gets more and more disturbing.
I even just love the ways that the cutscenes are shot, not the fully cinematic ones, but just the regular ones. It's from kind of an overhead perspective,
and
it gives this really
are you watching too?
but defamiliarizing like perspective of the characters. Like you're just like watching these
just observing it
like
go
pieces
wrong.
just like doing stuff, like Kaim just like mercilessly like thrusting his sword inside a corpse. Seeing that from like that perspective just gives it this whole other level of uncomfiness and coldness, the way you're kind of being asked to relate to these characters.
Yeah, I think the cutscene direction, in particular in this game, is like really good, and that's one way I think it's like kind of a step above a lot of other games at the time.
Very true. Yeah, the
Yeah.
cinematics when they happen are grossly entertaining.
Yeah, and Taro had like previously been the cinematic director of a game called Phase Paradox, which didn't come out in the West, but was like published by Sony and has like, it's like an adventure game, kind of a horror game, like, and so I think that might be part of why he was made director on this game too, is because he had that previous experience, and you can kind of see that coming through here. Like that's really where his, a lot of his expertise is shown, is through those scenes.
And like to kind of go along with that, like the voice acting, like kind of vacillates between like breathy and weirdly dramatic, and then insane.
Like I think I heard Leonard going, "Whoa!" Like,
yeah, and like
silly.
Yeah, and Verdelay too.
La 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 la.
Just has so many. Yeah.
Like it's just
yeah. Or I love Inuart.
It catches me off guard sometimes too, where like it kind of spooks me when it chimes in. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Or like during that black dragon fight. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
yeah. Inuart is like chained to like the cross or whatever, and and he's got like the dark like voice inside of his head, and it just keeps repeating like it's like make her mine, and like whatever. It's just like very skin crawling,
Yeah, there's like a hamminess to these voice performances that like don't quite reach like full camp, so it's like it doesn't feel light in any way.
I think it's because the game isn't light, so it sounds like insanity.
Yeah, so it just sounds like insanity, exactly.
Yeah,
but,
it just sounds like people broken and breaking.
And they draw a good contrast between like, I feel like the characters before they've kind of descended into madness are more hammy,
that's true.
And then as those kind of elements come to the fore, it's like less hammy and more just like direct and kind of insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Angelus's voice performance is just legitimately really good. Like, I think the way like she like speaks to Kaim and to you as a player is just like really effective.
Yeah,
it's the only controlled performance
of
any of them.
And it makes sense because she's kind of like an unbiased, like third-party observer to all of this, right? And she kind of sees herself as above all of the
human squabbling,
fighting and their petty squabbles. There's like a really good this is like early on when you first meet Verdelay, but he's like praying to the gods for like mercy or whatever, and she says something like, oh, one human kills, the other human prays, all are the same, and like all are fools or whatever. It's like very kind of sums up her like perspective for a lot of the game. But
can we talk about something I really want to talk about?
Yes.
The weapon stories.
Yeah, of course.
I love the weapon stories so much. It is like dark, evil Mother Goose, and I'm so thrilled whenever my weapon levels up. And just to kind of like, I mean, I didn't waste my time for a lot of them. Like I did just go online just to read them, but like some of them are just so messed up. Like there's no good moral. It's just bad things happen, good people die, like etc. Like here, I got one of them open here. The weapon is called Injustice. Level 1, a sword wielded as a symbol of justice by the successive heroes of a kingdom. The church of the land imbued it with powerful magic so that any who fought for injustice would be blessed. The first hero was a great general who smashed any invading army. He killed a score of enemy by his own hand. The second hero is a great general who defended his country from mutinous rebellion. He captured each and every one of the mutineers and by his own hand carried out their sentences of death. The last hero was a general who invaded and colonized a foreign land. In this conquered country, he ordered and massacred tens of thousands of innocent lives. Like, perfect. Just evil, awful stories.
The end.
Yeah, the end. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a great one to pick, Steph, because it kind of perfectly encapsulates like the tone that the game is going for.
Yeah, and like there's a bunch of these. Like a lot of them do just end on a total downer, or if it's justice, it's like some sort of perverted justice where like someone still got slaughtered for it. Or like the merchant, spent his whole life searching for this thing that just killed him in the end. Perfect, just a evil little moral to greed.
Yeah, and I think that extends too to like the kind of lore and like setup of the world with like the seals and everything, like that
sacrifice.
Like that the price of the seals is like very steep, and like the price of making a pact with like another another powerful being is like very steep, and it's all very like kind of dark, and like the Empire is obviously this like invading evil oppressive force, but you also get the sense that the Union is not really any better, and the thing that they're trying to like protect and maintain is like evil kind of in its own way. And I think that's interesting, kind of change from how like you and RPGs would typically portray their worlds, that it's like, oh, you have a lot of like traditional or conservative elements to like, I think a lot of RPGs where it's like, oh, we have to maintain the status quo, and this evil thing is coming to change and corrupt our like...
Vertile being the most annoying character in the history of video games perfectly encapsulates
that. Yeah, that like the church is kind of like, ugh. And it's like, of course, like the church being evil is not really a new thing for RPGs, but just this whole like there is no real good force, or there's no real everything is just kind of like a different, it's awful in its own way.
Like in a normal RPG, like the evil force, whatever it is, would be the thing that like triggers the goodness of like the heroes, but here's just like evil begets evil. Like Kaim's clearly like suffered at the hands of the Empire, and that has driven him insane and driven him to see like this mass murder he's committing as like justified, or at least like if not even like justified. I don't think Kaim thinks of himself as a hero either, but just like this is what you get, like it's just like pure revenge.
And even like Furie, like normally that would be like, oh, you have to like protect the princess or the goddess or whatever, but even she maybe not the most evil character, or certainly, but like there are elements of her that are kind of disturbing as well, right? Like, and we kind of like mentioned that with like the incest kind of aspect of it, but just she's not really there. And the lack of, I think also the like lack of substance. I think Zach, that you brought that up a little bit to her, and then what substance is there is kind of like disturbing. And so there, like, what are you really like? It makes you question like is Kaim even fighting for? Because it's like, he
doesn't even seem to give a crap about Fury.
Wait, can I actually trouble you with Furie's dagger, the weapon history? Okay,
so do it.
Level 1, I mustn't trouble my brother. He's busy with sword practice, so I must be a good girl and not bother him to play with me. Level 2, I mustn't trouble my brother. He's busy with politics, so I must be a good girl and not bother him to talk with me. Level 3, I mustn't trouble my brother. He's busy fighting other countries, so I must be a good girl and not bother him with my worries. Level 4, I mustn't trouble my brother. I mustn't let him know of the dark lust hiding in my bosom. If he were to see me like this, I would have to end my own life. Like, she's clearly very messed up in the head, too.
Yeah.
She's aware of her dark thoughts, and she is trying to repress them the entire time too, and just came out all in the worst way. I don't want to say she's pitiable, but I mean, everybody needs a therapist, okay?
They need a psychiatric ward probably, but I mean, I think that Fury is interesting because, and Ben knows more about this than I do. We talked about this sort of pre-recording, is that she was based on a character from some light novel that Taro just absolutely despised. And it was like some incest.
Yeah, it's called like Sister Princess. Yeah, and it has like an incest plotline, and he was like very bothered by that. And so, and she's also like somewhat based on Rei Ayanami from Evangelion as well.
Yeah.
See that? Yeah.
For sure.
And so just like this kind of, damsel character, or like this like kind of forbidden like love kind of character, wallflower
like
type.
a shell.
yeah, like a projection of someone's desires, really. And I think that's what he was kind of reacting to, that he hates that character that's like a just for the audience or a person to project their desires on. And that's kind of what Fury Eye is, you know.
I do like that he goes as far as he does to actually putting unlikable characters in there, you know, like it is very patently characters with very clear problems, like, being psychotic, being murdery, being incestuous, being whatever winner it is. Let's you know, well, like it, it is willing to talk about some really awful, dingy subjects that none others really go.
And that's kind of what like Inuart represents too, right? Like he's projecting all of his like love and like all of this desire onto her that's not really reciprocated, and that's like kind of the source of
sad irony.
And it's also like the source of his like corruption, right? Like, I mean, that's
goodness.
why. And I think Taro is kind of, you know, trying to like criticize that in a way, like this, it's not good to do that to people, and not good to like put a woman on a pedestal in that way.
I'll be curious to see, and I'll sort of hold judgment on this until after ending A, but I think Taro is doing something that I think he sometimes is maybe less guilty of later, but still guilty of, where it's a thing that kind of drives me crazy sometimes, where he, in trying to make fun of the trope or in trying to criticize the trope, ends up doing it maybe too subtly for maybe 90% of people to understand, and so he plays into the trope instead.
That actually makes me feel a lot of things for Drakengard 3. Like I kind of get that vibe a lot with that one.
And I'll be curious when I play that, but like he does it with Kaine, he does it with 2B, and it happens in lots of other things where female agency is taken away, and it's to criticize the men almost always. I think about, again, Lisa the Painful, a game I do not like, partially because it tries to play around with that idea, but it takes it so far that I think it ends up being sort of like rape scenes in Game of Thrones, where I'm like, I understand what you're trying to do, but this is what you're actually doing. So I'll be curious to see where I think of it later. But for me right now, I'm like, what you're trying to do with Fury Eye seems like a different form of objectification to make your point. And I'm just not sure how I feel about it right now.
I agree, Zach. Like I haven't seen like anything past ending A so far, but so far I think Fury Eye's characterization is the most problematic. And just in comparison to like 2B and Kaine, like they have such a stronger voice and agency compared to her. So unless they like really do something like different, like I'm not seeing like where this like really like redeems itself completely, but I will reserve my judgment till episode 2.
Well, you do also have Ariak as kind of like a foil to that, you know?
Oh gosh,
And I think that in a lot of ways, like those two characters kind of get combined in some of his like later work in a way that is maybe a little better executed than what you have here. Right, because like I think like Zero, for example, has elements of both those characters, or 2B kind of has elements of both those characters, and when you have, you know, when the character kind of has more those like two sides to them, maybe they're a little more fleshed out. Whereas here, they're both kind of just like
separate tropes.
Yeah. But this is also his first, you know, real attempt at that. So
Yeah, and we'll certainly talk more about that next time. And if we are starting to dive, because we keep kind of pushing up against talking into the next ones, there's one last thing I want to talk about before we sign off, though, and that is the end of ending A, which I found very odd.
Yes. Kind of a boring one, actually. I was hoping to get to B.
You find out that Mana is, been overtaken, and then for some reason, this child who didn't have anything to do with what she was doing, at least as far as I'm aware, after she's not possessed anymore, you and the dragon are like, oh, you get to live with your sins. Like, it's not, are they really her sins? I don't know how I feel about that. But, and then.
That becomes a big plot point in part 2, which is kind of funny you bring up too. And same with that, I was like, but why?
Yeah. And Angelus reveals her name, and then she becomes the goddess. And then, like, the last scenes between Angelus and Kaim are, they're interesting. They're giving me a little bit of a romancy vibe, but I'm not sure if they were going for that.
No, that's intended. But it's intended. Yeah.
I didn't really feel like it was led up to, but I do feel like it could sort of reposition some of the later endings maybe in an interesting way. I'm not sure, but I was like, what?
Yeah, you kind of have this element of like her kind of being above it all and being kind of arrogant about the like, plight of these humans, and then by the end, through this bond with Kime, like kind of having a different, becoming close to them and like having some kind of like empathy for them. I don't know that it's really like the most well executed, but it is like I think it's a really interesting idea, right? And it's kind of a bittersweet kind of way to end the game and kind of focus on that bond between Angelus and Kime, which I think makes sense for ending A, because that's like the one thing that's like a constant till you get to ending A, because you're not necessarily required to like interact with all the other companions and everything. So it kind of makes sense to like have that be like the focus of that ending, even if it doesn't necessarily earn that payoff necessarily.
Yeah, I did think the romantic aspect felt kind of weird and off and abrupt, but I do think chapter 8 in general was building up to like something like that pretty well, in that like once you have to like one of the final fights is the Elder Dragon that comes up, and Angelus is expressing like a lot of hesitation towards fighting it because she still has like respect for like dragon culture and history. And then it seems like she's like kind of fighting back Kime's will to just like go and kill it, but it seems like his will just overcomes it. He just kind of like pushes her towards doing it, and then she does it, and then she feels like weirdly thankful at the end of that mission. Like she ends up like thanking Kime for like showing her true power. And my read on that was kind of like her becoming more human. And I think the reason that happened is because somehow in this pact, I don't know if like Kime became more dragon-like, but it seems like if anything, out of their pact, Kime's will was the triumphant one. And that like ultimately his thirst for revenge is ultimately what transforms Angelus in a way. And then there's also like, some weird kind of romantic thing apparently develops out of that too, which I didn't think hit as well. But there's something interesting going on there with their relationship being kind of more parasitic than like a harmonious bond. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Alex, I think that kind of parasitic nature of the bond of the pact, like I think some of the other characters who have pacts with like a pact beast, like that, it kind of shows that as well, right? Like Verdolet and the petrified dragon, or later like Sire and the golem, or Inuart with his dragon. Like you're kind of seeing that, and the more weaker personality kind of getting eclipsed by the stronger one. And I think that is kind of, even though a lot of the game is Kime and Angelus are very strong personalities, but that is like him kind of winning out over her. And in some ways, like the whole journey is kind of them clashing, and like that internal battle between them because of the pact, that while he's having these external battles with the Empire and everything. So yeah, I think that makes sense as an interpretation.
Yeah, it's just interesting how it's like not like a parasitic relationship that Kime at least seems completely conscious of his power over, because like he's genuinely like heartbroken, it seems, when Angelus is dying. And then it also leads Angelus to do this like completely like selfless act that he seems to appreciate. So yeah,
we'd all cry if
some
we lost our
interesting
dragon buddy,
there.
okay?
Yeah.
It's a true story.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm particularly curious to see how it recontextualizes some of the other endings. I only know one of the approaching endings. It's only because I know Nier. So we'll see. I'm guessing things won't get happier as they go.
Oh God, no. No, the next endings are seriously like whack in a good way. I love it.
Yeah, they're pretty crazy. But I do think it's ending A is interesting just because it is what leads directly into Drakengard 2. So even if it's not the most interesting ending on its own. I think that like the fact that they revisit this like canon that spawns from this ending and then do a lot with that and with the characters from Drakengard 1 and Drakengard 2, like kind of retroactively makes it more interesting or important in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I am curious to see the other endings. Maybe not Drakengard 2. We'll see. But in 2 weeks, you'll get to hear us talking about all those other endings. And as you could probably tell listening to this, I personally found it difficult to talk about this game without all the pieces and parts. And so I'm excited for us to be able to talk about it. I'm sure the listeners are like, who've already played it are like, but what about this? So, we'll get there. In 2 weeks, we will be talking about more Drakengard. But after that, 2 weeks after that, we're going to do something that we've already kind of touched on a little bit here, but it's going to be a full-blown thing where we are going to talk 2 weeks after our Drakengard episode about Yoko Taro, his whole oeuvre, sort of from the beginning to the end. I've been watching the anime. I've got some short stories on deck. I'm going to watch some of his plays. Like, he does some crazy stuff, and he recontextualizes stuff in really interesting ways, which is one of the things that I'm going to focus on in that conversation. But then after the Taro episode, we're going to go a little more traditional. Going to go back to the PS1, and we are going to have 2 episodes on Star Ocean 2, a game I haven't played since release. And I remember finding the crafting in it maddening as a kid. But I've heard it's a little easier now. So I'm really excited to chat about Star Ocean 2 and revisit that game because I've heard the remake or remaster is really, really good. And I'll play it that way.
There's still room on that podcast?
I think you actually might already be signed up for it, Steph.
Yes.
I think you might be. So if you want to get in touch with us, give us any feedback, tell us why somehow the combat in Drakengard is good. You can email us retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky. Usually, if you're interacting on those platforms, you'll be talking to one of us on the podcast, and that is Steph, who does an amazing job. We're also on Twitch with Scott, who streams almost every day. He's a machine. He's unbelievable. We also have some stuff on YouTube. We're usually RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com in most of those places. You can also interact with some of us on the RPG Fan Discord. We also have a shop, actually 2 shops. One of them is hosted by TeePublic, where we have things like t-shirts, mugs, things like that. Really high quality shirts, a lot of cool stuff there. Steph just put together a really cool advertisement for it on social media recently. And then we also have another one hosted by a place called Hyperplay RPG. I'm talking about Steph a lot here. I'm about to talk about her more, which is a collection of 300 of our review cards, which you might see on Instagram, which were originally and almost always designed by Steph. And it's a really, really cool collection of stuff. It feels like an old like sort of video game magazine. And I like it not just because my name appears in it. We also have 2 other podcasts. One is usually hosted by Jono, and it is called Random Encounter, where we usually talk about, more current things. If you want to hear about the games that are coming out, reviews for that. Pretty recent one Ben was on where he talks about the first game to get a 100 in the history of RPG Fan. I won't give away what it is. You can go listen to that if you want. And then we also have Rhythm Encounter, which is on every other Monday from Random Encounter, which is about RPG music, usually hosted by Mike Salvato. If you want to review us, you can review us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify. If you can find podcasts there, we are there. And let's talk about how to get in touch with the individual panelists, starting with you, Aleks.
You can email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com.
And Ben.
You can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
It's both very easy to remember, which is good. And Steph, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me most anywhere on social medias as Dice, like playing Dice SMS.
Awesome. And if you want to get in touch with me, probably the best way is email, either that retro email or zachw@rpgfan.com. I also check our Discord occasionally. If you DM me there, I will see it eventually. So thank you 3 for moving through this insanity with me.
Yes.
And I look forward to the insanity that is to come. And thank you, listeners. Good night and good luck.